Hi, my name's Erin. I'm a therapist, and today I'm going to talk about the 7 most common reasons people don't embrace their emotions or don't process difficult emotional experiences, and also why they don't seek out therapy. First reason is emotional flooding. Emotional flooding is the experience of the autonomic nervous system going into hyper gear when we feel triggered by the retelling of an event or experience. Someone who's emotionally flooding is going to experience an increase in heart rate and respiration rate. They're going to have a difficult time controlling the pace of their speech, and they're going to have a difficult time feeling grounded in the moment. Okay. And this can be a really disorienting experience for people when they feel emotionally flooded. And it can be a detriment or a discouraging factor when it comes to processing difficult emotional events and seeking support for emotional events, is the fear of this happening. So in this video, I want to speak to all of these fears. And in response to this first fear of emotional flooding, I want to make the point that for those who are afraid of starting therapy because they are afraid of emotionally flooding, therapists are trained to be co-regulators, meaning we're trained to be able to help people to calm their nervous system. Also, someone who is a trauma therapist should be trained in specialized modalities that allow individuals to retell difficult storylines and that help them with the process of retelling and refeeling these difficult and challenging events in ways that they can process them and remain in the present moment versus emotionally flood. The second reason that people will avoid therapy or they have a hard time embracing difficult emotions is due to the shame that they feel around certain events that have happened in their life. I will oftentimes commend my clients on their bravery in sharing their stories in therapy with me and in being willing to take risks and processing some of these difficult emotions because it is challenging. And for those who are frightened of starting therapy or of processing things, events that they have never touched before due to shame, I want to say something. At least I know in my experience working as a therapist, there has never been something that I've been told that has actually changed the way that I feel about a client or that changes my thoughts about each of our inherent worth as human beings. Okay, we have all done things that we are ashamed of, your therapist including. And that shouldn't preclude you from getting the support that you need in challenging these events where you behaved, thought, in ways that were maybe incongruent to your values at the time of the event. I will oftentimes tell clients, we need to take accountability for the things that we're ashamed of and the things that we've done that we are not proud of. However, I think before we can do that, we need to be able to process these things and understand and show ourselves some grace and compassion. Every single thing that we've done, including the things that we're ashamed of, we have done to either ascertain a need or to protect ourselves from experiencing the pain of grief of not getting a need met. And I think when we are able to view our life events from this perspective, it allows us to be gentler with ourselves and it allows us to shine light on some of those shadow places inside of us that we would rather not take a look at, but where liberation actually lives too. The third reason why people might not embrace certain emotional experiences fully or seek out therapy has to do with attachments and fears of saying goodbye. This could be attachment to people. It could be attachment to certain addictions that you might have. There are a lot of people who want to feel relief for some of the areas in their lives where they're attached to people, places, and things that maybe don't feel good, but they might not be ready to say goodbye. And so this sort of prevents them from seeking out help or talking to other people about their pain experience or their grief experience, where they're not getting their needs met in certain areas of their life or where they are blocking themselves from receiving more. I will oftentimes tell people, if you are someone who is, for example, living a secret life, like maybe you have an affair going on, or maybe you have a hidden addiction, or you have not even an addiction, and you're not ready to say goodbye yet, that doesn't mean that you can't process the emotions around these situations. And it doesn't mean that you can't get help and support and have a safe space to be and feel whole within yourself as you process certain situations and life events. What I would say to someone who is worried about judgment from another person or perhaps a therapist with regards to attachments and fears of saying goodbye, I would encourage people to say to people, when they first speak to them and say, listen, like, I'm not ready to do anything about X, Y, or Z right now, but I need a safe space in order for me to feel whole and for me to process my emotions around said issue. Okay. And someone who is able to meet you in that space and able to be that safe container is going to be someone that, is okay with that first and foremost, and that you feel like you can trust. So oftentimes we need to feel people out to see whether they can actually be what we need. But I would say, if you are someone who is afraid of saying goodbye to people, places, and things, that doesn't mean that you can't still receive support for how these attachments impact you, and how they are maybe backing up in your life. So another reason that people might not embrace certain difficult emotional experiences or come to therapy has to do with anticipatory guilt and loyalty. Okay, so this is number 4, and I want to take a minute to talk about what I mean by anticipatory guilt. So there are a lot of people who anticipate feeling guilty about revealing certain aspects of their life narrative or story that have to do with people that they love. Okay, so for example, sharing difficult memories of childhood, sharing difficult experiences in your marriage, right? Like, there are people who feel this sense of loyalty and attachment to certain loved ones, and they don't want to be bad-mouthing them in therapy or to other people. And they don't want to share exactly what's going on inside of these relationships or what has occurred inside these relationships because they don't want to throw anybody under the bus. So I want to say that as human beings, as like whole human beings, people that we love can also be people that have hurt us, right? It doesn't need to be one or the other. We're so inclined to think in terms of like duality, like good, bad, right, wrong. You know, your mother could have been tremendously supportive and a wonderful mother and also be an integral part of your grief experiences or things that you've struggled with in time. Your significant other could still be a supportive partner, but also be contributing to a grief experience that you are having currently. Okay, so the two can coexist. You know, we are interpersonal beings. Other people impact us. And it's okay for you to claim the ways in which others have impacted you as part of your narrative. And it doesn't mean that you're being disloyal or that you're throwing anyone under the bus. It just means that you're being whole and you're claiming all of your story. Now, again, I talked about this earlier. We do want to vet who we're sharing these things with. Like, I wouldn't encourage people to just share intimate details of their marriage to just anyone, or things about their upbringing to a random person that they met, because we want to make sure that people are trustworthy and we develop a sense of trust with small to larger investments over time. But people can hold space for the complexity of human nature. Okay, sometimes we tend to underscore like how much other people can hold. And I want to say that it is possible for people to hold space for the complications of relationship dynamics, and particularly in therapy. So the 5th reason is fear of co-opting someone else's story, and being selfish. So I want to take a minute to kind of flesh this out with you. What I mean by fears of co-opting someone else's story or being selfish is I'm really speaking to the people who are brought to therapy or who are having a hard time embracing difficult life events that have to do with other people's trauma, okay, or other people's losses or grief experience. Like, perhaps you have a partner who is chronically ill, or a loved one who is chronically ill, or maybe you have a loved one that was recently assaulted or abused, and the ways in which your loved one is living their life currently or what they're processing creates a grief experience within you, has been really challenging for you. It's okay for you to receive support for the ways that other people's life experiences impact you. Again, I'm going to refer back to what I said in the last clip, which is that other people's experience as interpersonal beings, other people's experiences impact us. We know this through secondary trauma studies, that sometimes even listening to traumatic events can have a deep impact on the person who was listening and not even present at the time of the event. So just because you're not the one experiencing the trauma doesn't mean that you might not have embracing to do and processing to do around certain events that loved ones have or are experiencing. And doesn't mean that you should not seek out support or talk about these things and the ways in which other people's grief experience is impacting you. So the sixth reason is fear of traumatizing other people. So I know in the previous clip, I was just saying, that secondary trauma exists and we can traumatize people by telling our stories. So I want to backpedal here a bit. There are people who are trained to hear traumatic stories, and that is what your therapist is trained to do, particularly if they're a trauma therapist. Okay, so it breaks my heart when I hear from people that none of their loved ones know about particularly traumatic events, or it's the first time they're talking about something traumatic in therapy that has happened to them. It breaks my heart because we deny ourselves an opportunity to receive love and support when we shut people out or we don't talk about traumatic events. And I want to make a point here, particularly with, I call them big wipeouts. I refer to our traumas as falls. Particularly when it comes to our big wipeouts, not everyone can handle those kinds of disclosures. So I do want to normalize that for people who are afraid of that not everyone can handle that. But I would bet that there are certain people in your life that can handle the realities of certain life events. And if they can't, there are professionals who can, and who can attune to you and hold space for those traumatic life events, okay? And who wouldn't want you to be alone in shutting these sort of experiences away, not fully processing them or embracing the felt sense or the grief experience that is buried within some of these traumatic life events. I actually had a conversation with about this with a friend recently, where I said to her, we deny each other the ability to love one another when we don't share difficult times with people that have earned our trust, right? And who love us. As someone who loves people deeply, I want to know when something is going on with someone that I love. And if someone is hiding something from me or keeping something because they're afraid of how it would impact me, it denies me the experience of loving this person. It denies me feeling like this is a two-way relationship, right? So I really think it's important to take into account some of these ideas we have around what people can or can't handle, or what they do or do not want to hear, right? Because we are denying them the gift, and it is a gift and it's a privilege to be able to hold space for people, to be able to love them and support them through challenging times. So the final reason that people might not fully embrace their emotional experience or seek help has to do with misperceptions on grief and dirty pain. So misperceptions on grief, I did a whole video about what grief is, which I referred to earlier, which is grief is the emotional experience that we have when a need goes unmet. And our needs are vast. Okay, so I gave a few examples in this video of things that are grief that you might not think are grief. And so what I found in therapy is a lot of times people don't even realize that they have this deep grief experience, or they have a grief experience that maybe hasn't been fully embraced, or they haven't really processed, that impacts them and impacts the defense mechanisms they've developed, what I call our chasing, embracing behaviors to life. That again impacts them on a daily basis, and it has formed these defensive strategies and continues to propel these forward. Okay, because they're uneducated on what it is what's the actual motivator, what is the grief experience that has not been processed, that they're still trying to protect or defend themselves from re-experiencing in the present moment. Okay, so that's the first part of this last category for why we don't embrace or seek help for emotional experiences. And along those lines, so the lack of education around grief, and then also the lack of education on how do we embrace our emotions. So dirty pain, I'm going to do a whole video on this. It's the next stop. is really what are our thoughts and interpretations and misinterpretations when it comes to our emotional experience that sort of stagnate the sort of natural, I want to say titration and aeration of our emotions. Okay, when we are in this state of like hyperanalysis or obsession, we actually block the natural state of filtering out and moving out emotions. The root word for emotions, by the way, it's Latin and it means to move out. Okay, so we actually block that when we're in this state of like hypervigilance of needing to solve and fix and whatever. So that's what we refer to in ACT therapy as dirty pain. Clean pain is allowing us to fully, it's the experience of embracing and aerating out our emotions. My last video was all about embracing. So what I was trying to do was to align people with clean pain, with how to cleanly process their emotional experience. Dirty pain, again, comes from our misinterpretations as well as our interpretations about challenging life events that block us actually from fully submitting to embracing the inner sensations and aerating them out. Okay, so next video, we're gonna talk a lot about dirty pain, and you're gonna become a little bit more intimate with the concept and also clean pain. But for now, just note that that can be a real detriment when it comes to embracing our emotional experiences and seeking support for therapy. And so my counter for people who don't have the education is watch these videos. Like seek out the information, take a look at like some of the things in your own life story that may qualify as a grief event. Seek out a therapist, do some exploring around this because you won't be sorry. And the second, about the dirty pain and hyperanalysis of our problems and all of that, I would say resource the prior video, take a look at some of these embracing skills that I provide, and then definitely tune in for the next video where I get into how we really align with clean pain over dirty pain. And I get more into the nuances and I go more into detail about what dirty pain is, how we fall into it, and again, how we can come to embrace our emotional experience and get the support that we need so that we can feel whole, healthy, and strong.